Well, hi. My name is Jeanne Pernia. I was born Jeanne Mulligan. I was born in New York City to an Irish dad and a Puerto Rican family mom. And I have one older brother, and he and I are from our parents. And after 6 years, unfortunately, my mom divorced my dad. And she made a decision to move to Miami. She liked the sun, and it was there that she met my stepdad, who had come from Cuba. That's important because I have the great opportunity of speaking Spanish very well, and I attribute that to the fact that my stepdad taught me how to speak Spanish. Unfortunately, at the age of 15, my mom's marriage once again went down the drain, and now she had 2 more kids, so it was us 4 with my mom. And it took us back to New York City, where she had the opportunity to become a medical administrator. And as a young mom raising her teenage daughter, she kept me very close to her. She kept me at the clinics, learning to do everything that you learn as a medical assistant. And by the age of 20, I was pretty much well equipped to be a medical assistant. And it was then that I told her, Mom, I don't want to stay in New York City. This is a lot of nightlife, and I would rather go back to Miami. And that's exactly what I did. I moved in with one of her friends, and I decided to get a job in a medical center. And I had also enrolled at the community college because I was really interested in the medical field. And it was then that I answered an ad in the Miami Times. They were looking for a receptionist in a women's center. I had worked with OBGYNs, and I had a lot of experience in that, so I applied and got the job. Unfortunately, within 3 weeks, I had a pretty bad auto accident, and I bruised my face pretty bad. And I just couldn't sit in front of the reception area because people were like wondering what happened, what truck hit her. And so I was let go. And it was then, within 2 weeks, that my mom had moved also down to Miami, and I told her to apply for the job. Well, I thought all they did was give out birth control pills, do annual checkups. What I didn't know is that they also performed abortions, something that they really kept very low-keyed. Only the medical staff knew what was going on in the back. But my mom found out. As a medical administrator, she learned the business quite quickly. And it was shortly after that, within maybe 6 months, that she said, you know what? We can do this. We can rent a facility in the city of Hialeah, which is where we had purchased our home, and we can provide these services for women. And that's what she did. She set out to find the busiest intersection in the city of Hialeah, which at that time, we're talking 1977, 77, there were many Cuban and Caribbean women that were moving. They were influxing in from the islands, and for the most part, they did not want to have children right when they got here. So it was the demand was there. I was having a lot of friends at the college. And so the mindset was, why not have a place that is high tech, clean, good doctors that are licensed, and a facility that could provide these abortions for these women? And sure enough. But the key issue was that my mom, in all honesty, was just in and out of different relationships. She, at that time, was dating someone who was really causing her a lot of just anguish. There were arguments, there were fights. I remember there were days that she would just pass out, and I felt, in a way, like responsible, that if only I could find someone who could come and buy this other, because her boyfriend was her partner. And it was almost like it was all set up. I met an older man. He owned a furniture store, And he was interested. He was of Cuban descent, had been in the United States for a little over 5 years. And he was interested in being a doctor in Cuba and never was able to achieve that. So when I told him what I was involved in, he asked me, he says, "Are you sure your mom wouldn't be interested in having a silent partner, someone who could invest some money?" And I said, "Wow, that's very interesting." I said, "Absolutely, let me set it up." And that's what I did. I set it up, they met, and sure enough, he bought out my mom's partner. He became my sexual partner as my boyfriend, invited me to many trips. We went abroad to Venezuela because he was selling video cassette recorders, and nothing better than having a young American girl who was bilingual and a great opportunity at this business venture. And so in my mind, I was pretty happy with everything at that moment. I thought, wow, you know, I found my shining armor guy that was going to give me everything I wanted, have the opportunity to go to school and become a professional. And unfortunately, within 8 months, the story changed, because I remember I was going to college with my mom. She was actually taking some courses. And I said, "Mom, you know, I really want to go to McDonald's. I'm hungry. I want to eat something." And I walked into the restaurant and I looked at her and I said, "Oh no, I feel nauseous." It was within seconds that I knew, could I be pregnant? And so the next day we did a blood test. And one of the things that stands out was maybe the fear or the excitement. I took the phone into her closet and called the lab. And I mean, I had been sexually active for about 3 years, and I never got pregnant. It was almost like I believed that I couldn't get pregnant. But the test was positive. And I was so excited. My mom was taken back. She didn't know what to feel, but she knew that I had to share this with the baby's father. So I set up, I was kind of playing with him on the phone and said, "I want to go to a nice restaurant. I want to prepare a nice meal. I've got some really great, exciting news." And I did that. He allowed me to come over to his apartment, prepare a meal. And right before we started to eat, I said, "Well, we're going to be parents. I'm pregnant." And I remember the look on his face. There was almost like a grin on his mouth. And he said, "What?" He says, "What are you saying?" I said, "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." And he looked at me. He says, "I don't think so." And I go, "What do you mean you don't think so?" He says, "I don't think that's a very good idea. I mean, we just started this relationship. It's not even been a year, and you've got college, and we just started the clinic." And I remember looking at him and telling him, "The clinic?" He says, "Yeah." He says, you can just have the abortion." And I said, "Wait a minute. That abortion that they do there are for women who don't want their baby. That is not my case. I want the baby." I don't even remember if we finished dinner or not, but I remember that I left. I went back to my mom's house. I was devastated. My heart was broken. I couldn't believe what I had heard. And I remember that I woke up the next day and I told my mom, and she looked at me and she said, "Honey, I'm here for you, but I think you really need to think about it." And that was almost like putting the lid on the bottle. But I'll tell you what, I remember standing strong and saying, "That's okay, I can do it. They'll change their mind. I want the baby." And I remember that week I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I was just toiling with this. I'd get up in the morning really strong and feeling like I can do it, I can have this baby. But when the evening came, the phone wasn't ringing, and if it did ring, and if he invited me out, he was going to try to convince me, whereas I thought I was going to convince him. And either in the morning or that evening, I would plow back to the house, devastated once again, and then I began to think. And it was almost like I had to mentally find a way that would make me feel like I did need to have the abortion. Maybe they were right and I was wrong. And I thought, this baby's not going to be healthy. I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, all of my emotions. How could this baby be okay? But I hung in there for another week. And by the second Saturday, my mind was made up. And I decided to call the doctor, Dr. Curbelo, and I said, you need to come in on Sunday. He says, why? I says, because I'm not going to have the baby. Nobody will be there on Sunday, and I don't want my mom to be there. And so I told my boyfriend, I told the anesthesiologist, and if I could remember, my mom's sister-in-law used to work also there. And so on Sunday morning, I made sure not to eat anything. Back then they prepped you, if you know what that means. I remember being wheeled down towards the surgical room, being put to sleep, looking around in a waiting room that I was always there for everybody, but there was no one there for me that day. There was no one to explain anything to me. Of course, I knew what was going to happen. And all I remember was waking up in what we call the recovery room, a room that had little white beds with real sheets that oftentimes I would have to take home to wash. Nobody was there to offer me a cookie or a cup of juice. I remembered so many women that laid in that bed, and I would at least go and hug them and tell them that they were going to be okay. But all I heard was the footsteps of the doctor, who came out walking and saying, man, she really was not a candidate for this because she was my worst patient. And all I said was, please don't say anything anymore. I don't want to hear you. All I want to do is get out of here. And my boyfriend was out in the waiting room, and I remember that we opened up the back door, and as I walked out, there was just bursts of just the strong sunshine. And I remember looking up, and the pain in my heart was stronger than the pain in my uterus, although there was a lot of pain. And I remember saying to myself, I didn't say it out loud, but I just said, God, not like I knew God, please, please let me be a mom again. And from there we went to an IHOP, I remember. And it was to have breakfast because I was hungry, but as we were walking in the door, there was this lady with this little baby in her arms, and I said, I can't eat here, I want to go home. And he took me back to his apartment, kind of soothed me, brought me some soup. And all I can remember was that within 8 weeks, I remember talking to the doctor and telling him, you know, it's like my cycle's not normal, you know, could there be something wrong? And he said, no, he said, make sure you take care of yourself. But sometimes it takes maybe a month or two to get back on your cycle. I waited another week, and now I was not feeling well. And I told my mom, I said, listen, we're still at it. We're still going out. It's not like he ran away. And if I'm pregnant, you are going to keep my secret because I will never go through that again. And she was very distraught. She said, don't worry. I think her own guilt was kind of coming in, and she said, we'll do it together. Well, we pushed forward 4 months. My mom said, today's the day. I said, okay. I was very nervous. But I'll never forget when I went in to be checked by the doctor and he examined me, his stool went crashing to the back of the wall. He said, oh my. He said, you're pregnant and you're probably about 16 weeks, Jeanne. What have you done? I said, listen, you told me that I wasn't going to be regular. I had the perfect alibi, right? But, he said, we need to call so-and-so. I said, we don't need to call nobody because I will never do that again. So understand that right now. And so sure enough, the cat was out of the bag. I was very scared, but I was going to have my baby. And on August 18th, 1979, my beautiful Charissa was born. People don't believe it, but I actually had her asleep. She was a very little baby. She almost weighed 5 pounds. She wasn't even a 5-pounder. But it was then that we severed the relationship, the business. Mom found somebody else to buy her out. She went on to do other things. But I left. I had a roommate at that time, and we had gone over to this other clinic that my mom had opened. And there was a young man who had just come from Cuba, practically about the same time that I had given birth. So this was 6 months later. And this young man was in the waiting room because he had come to see another lady who he was living in their home when he came from Cuba. And this woman had had some plastic surgery done because Mom had a plastic surgeon working at the clinic. And he saw my little girl. And he told my roommate had the baby in her arms, and he told her, he said, what a beautiful little girl. Are you her mom? And she said, no, her mom's in there. And I came out, and it just happened. We started dating. We decided that we wanted to be together. He absolutely loved my daughter, and I figured she's 6 months old. So if she's going to get a daddy, it's got to happen soon, because if not, I'm not going to bring another man into her life. And well, as God would have it, we got married. We had 2 more children. I had another daughter 3 years later. And shortly after that, I had my son. But I understand clearly that when you don't have a relationship with Jesus, no matter what relationship you're having, the enemy is going to be attacking it. And so it was happening. I was at that time still very involved in the Cuban culture of what they recognize their religion, which has a lot to do with images and idols. And you would pray to them as if they were the ones who were messaging God. But I came to a crisis in my life. Although I had an experience with a friend while I was at the abortion business, a girl who I did pray to the Lord and I did accept him, but I wasn't ready to serve him until I had my son. By now we were up in New York City. It was 1982. I had just had my daughter, my second daughter, and then in '83 I had my son. By that time, my marriage was practically over. My husband was out. We were separated. He was doing things that I don't even want to talk about. It was just very, very bad. And it was a moment in my life where I could honestly say I was severely depressed, primarily because of the 3rd pregnancy. But I was so lost. I just didn't feel like I wanted to live anymore. And once again, I know that God sent a woman into my life on a bank line. I had the 3 kids. I remember that people would say, but are you going to have this 3rd baby? And I said, wait a minute. I could put one here, one in the stroller, and I can grab the other one's arm. I can do 3. And I always wanted a boy. And so I was blessed because my 3rd was a boy. So when I met this woman, she asked me, she says, you look very sad. Would you like for me to pray for you? I said, honey, do whatever, because right now I just don't even really want to live. I've got these 3 kids. I don't know where my husband is. He shows up every second or third day. And she said, I would like to pray for you. And she did. She brought up, I was either 10 or 12 people to my apartment. A few days later, my husband was present. And I want you to know that these people prayed for us. They shared the gospel with me. They made sure that I got all of this other Cuban culture, religious items out of my house. And I'll never forget, she handed a Bible that was highlighted in the Psalms. I really fell in love with the book of Psalms. And she told me, you pray. And if he leaves, you fast and you look to God. And it was amazing because when I did that, all of a sudden it was like, this worked. This Bible really worked. I didn't have to light candles or look for flowers, or I was in love with Jesus. I say that my transformation was from inside out because it was a Pentecostal church that invited me in. And they had rules, and I was ready to do whatever they said. No makeup, no pants, whatever. But the glow in my face, and to bring my children, and to start to listening to songs, and we would actually go out in the community and pray in the streets in the Bronx. It was amazing. And slowly, within 4 months, got through that winter, my husband knew that something radical was happening. And it came to the point where I told him, either you come and you join me because I'm leaving New York. My father will help me once I get to Miami. And by the grace of God, my husband listened to me, and the people from the church took us to the airport. We left them all our belongings. We took our clothes and we came down to Miami. He wasn't yet ready, although he did go with me to church, he wasn't ready to give up his lifestyle. And it was within less than a year. I had the opportunity to go and get a certificate as a medical assistant and started working with a podiatrist there in Surfside in Miami. And my husband got arrested on another role going back to New York. I want you to know that when that happened, I was devastated because now all I could do was trust God, and I was scared. I was going to church, and I had to go to church because it was the only place where I would feel the peace that I needed to go another day. They would come on a little bus and pick me and the kids up and go to church. And it was then that I could hear from God. And my husband ended up being moved to El Paso, Texas. And this is an amazing story because the doctor that I was working with, his wife, had told me that she had experienced a similar situation and that my boss's partner had just moved to El Paso. So not only did I literally said, where's the map? Because I need to find out where is the city. I mean, I know Texas, right? But I didn't know where it was. And as God told me, because I was seriously thinking, maybe this is over. I need to cut it now and go on. But that's not what God asked me to do. He told me to trust him. And I did. And I went out to El Paso thinking that I could speak with someone to see if I could get my husband moved back to Miami. That did not happen. What ended up happening was God wanted me to have my desert experience. So I ended up moving to El Paso with my 3 kids, a very good friend and her granddaughter. I started to go to school. I got my degree, social work, addictionologist. I was working in the jails. I was working in the mental hospitals. He was preparing me for his bigger plan in my life. After 3.5 years, and I was very involved in church, my husband came home. And we decided that we would stay there because it was a good environment for our family. And in 2003, my son was now 18. we decided to move back to Miami. We were like fish out of water. We moved back, and this time I went looking for a church right there in my new neighborhood, which was Miami Lakes. And I was drawn to a middle school that had a sign that said Palm Vista Community Church. Well, I asked, what was the denomination? I wanted to make sure that these were Christian people, and sure enough, it was a non-denominational church, pretty much with a Baptist teaching there. And I started to go to that church as if that's where I needed to be. And it was actually 1 year almost to the day that they said they had a visiting pastor by the name of Reverend Jeanne. Well, I was excited to, hear someone else coming from a different state. And they said that he was coming because there was an issue in Miami that he wanted to discuss. I didn't know exactly what it was when I first entered the church, but it wasn't too long as I was sitting there that he became talking about abortion. It took me back because I had not heard about abortion. I didn't think about abortion. I didn't discuss it. It never came up in any of my case studies of the people that I was working with, but he had my attention because he said that he was doing a pilot program because Miami-Dade County had the highest number of abortion and abortion providers in the United States. And then he said there are 7 abortion businesses right here in the neighboring city of Hialeah. Now, that's when I started to really get nervous and really look to get out of there. But I knew that if I stood up, people were going to wonder, well, what's wrong with her? Why is she heading out the door? So I sat there, and one of my dear friends stood up as I'm doing today. And she began to share her story of abortion. Allow me to tell you that everything that I had pushed down from the moment that I got out of that recovery room started to bubble up. And I thought, well, you did that. Yeah, okay, God gave you another baby, gave you a couple of more babies. But what about that baby? And I started to weep in my chair. And as I walked out, I knew that I had to let that reverend know who was in the audience. And sure enough, he says to me that I walked up and I said, how can I help you start what I began? And I think he was taken back more than me. And he said, what? I said, yes. You know those 7 abortion businesses? Guess who planted the first seed? Me. So he invited me to coffee, and he said, I asked him, so what do I need to do? He says, well, are you ready to share your testimony? I said, oh no, I can't do that. Nobody knows, only my mom. My kids don't know, my husband doesn't know, my friends, my church. He says, well, how about finding a location? I said, I think I can help you do that. And it was within the next couple of days that I decided, after so many years, I would literally avoid the corner where that building that we ran the abortion business at. I wouldn't go by there, but I knew I needed to know. I needed to go back and see, were they still doing that? And as I approached, honestly, my legs were shaking, and it said Diagnostic Center. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I remember wanting to get the phone number so I could call, but then I looked to the left, and this little house, which I remembered, that used to be the chiropractor who used to rent us that building, he lived there, and it said for lease. And I'm like, oh, no. Here, God? I ripped around the block. And God said, yes, this is where you need to start. You need to look at that building and remember how many women you shared the issue of having an abortion. And so I got on the phone, I called John, I called Martha, I said, guys, I think I found our location. And on July 9th, 2007, we moved into the first pregnancy help clinic there in Hialeah, next door to that original building. And I remember that the women would come in and there was a small window that would actually, you could see the building through this window, and I would tell the women, listen, I understand, I get it, but I need to let you know what I did. I'm not telling you what to do. I would never do that. But I do need to tell you what happened to me. And in that building, back in 1978, 79, and we did that for 5 years in that little building where the women, it had like a little ramp. They didn't even fit there anymore because there was something about that corner, which I understand. There had been an abortion business there. So women and their mothers and their grandmothers would send the girls, go to that corner, I'm pretty sure there's an abortion business there. And they would come and it said pregnancy help clinic, and sure enough. So after the 5th year, I told Martha, the co-founder, Martha, I don't want to point to the building anymore. I want to be in that building. Understand, that building, we started it with my grandparents' inheritance in Puerto Rico. My mom sold her inheritance to start that business. I have every right to take that business and have it be transformed. And we started to pray. And it was March, I think 22nd or 23rd of 2013. We walked back in to where so many babies died, to where my baby died. But we were coming in as an army because these women were ready, as they had done up until then, right in the same building. And I remember that when we first got in there, it looked horrid, but as God would have it, one of the neighboring churches came in and they started to revamp the whole place. And what was really exciting was that before you can do this kind of work, I had to deal with my own abortion. And I went through the study, Forgiven and Set Free by Linda Cochran. And I was able to deal with all of the pain, all the regret, all of the issues that I had pushed down for so many years. And now my heart wanted to help women, not only help them understand that they needed to make a true decision on life, but to help those who had also had abortions. And wouldn't you know, there were women that would come from the local churches who had actually had an abortion in that building as well. Talk about redeeming work. So we would do Bible studies and get them healed. And once they're healed, all they want to do is volunteer. You need volunteers? Get these women healed. And we were able to open 4 more clinics throughout the city. We were just placing them in the areas where most abortion businesses were. We even had one in North Miami that was across the street from a Planned Parenthood, and guess what? They closed down. Planned Parenthood had to move out. After 10 years, in 2017, Reverend Ensor came back around. He's always been an affiliate person with the pregnancy help that we started. And he said, you know what, Jeanne? I'm working in China now. And I think we can use your story. Would you be willing to step up and travel with me? And I said, absolutely. I will always be a part of Heartbeat of Miami till the day that I'm not here anymore, because I know that only God could have placed me there. But now I wanted to go with Reverend Ensor, especially when he told me, I think the doors are opening up in Cuba. I had a real soft part in my heart for Cuba because of so many women that I encouraged to abort. Now I was going to be able to go to the island where, guess what? Abortion is #1 per capita in the island of Cuba. And as God would do, we got there and we started our first pregnancy center in a small little town called Soplo de Vida in Siboney, Santiago de Cuba. We've had the opportunity to travel not only to Cuba, but to Guatemala. We're doing amazing work in Colombia. Of course, we went out to Eastern Europe, to Vietnam, India. We went to the Czech Republic. And we're moving forward to Mexico. And all I can say is that there's nothing better than to know what you were created for. And I know what I was created for, because this would have probably been the least thing that I would have wanted to do. I was a psychologist, right? I mean, I work with people in all areas, but I realized that all that was to be able to work with that woman and that family and be able to identify with them. And I'm excited to share my story, as painful as it is, and it's actually been written in a book called Conquered, because I believe that's what I did. And the writer of that book is, and could only be, the first child that was saved in that abortion business, which was my daughter, Sharissa. So thank you. Thank you. And continue to defend life as God would have you to. Thank you.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? Passion Life, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
Closed countries and unreached people groups are the final frontier of global missions. 1/3 of humanity have still never heard the name of Jesus. 42% of the world's population live in closed countries with little or no gospel witness. And for every 30 missionaries that go to the reached, roughly 1 missionary goes to unreached people groups.
God's heart breaks for the nations. He longs to redeem a people from every tribe and nation on the earth. We believe God is calling a generation to go to closed countries and to unreached peoples. We've started the Open Initiative to help them get there. Find out how you can help open a closed country at abwe.org.
Jeanne, thank you for being part of the Gospel Life Rally and sharing your story. Before we get going, take us back to the beginning. Let's go back and start there. What would you convey as an important takeaway for our viewers about the beginning of your story?
Well, basically, I was a young 20-year-old looking for work. My mom raised me in working in clinics, and I was going to college, and she shared with me, you know what? We can actually open up an abortion business that will bring help to women who are in an unexpected pregnancy and help them in a moment in their crisis so they don't have to go to some back alley place.
So your initial motivation
Yes.
was not money.
No.
It was wanting to do good things. And I think this is important for our viewers because I think that some might think that everybody that's in the abortion business is just a demonic hellion. There's actually people, and they are misguided, their motives are wrong, they're sinful, but they really do think they're helping people. I think of abortionist Willie Parker, who calls himself a good Samaritan, the Christian abortionist.
Oh my. And I'll tell you, you know, a lot of our parents would bring pets home. My mom brought young women home that didn't have a place to stay. That was her heart.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like you said just for the money. And actually, when you gain money that way, it goes right through your hands. She never had money, but she always had a caring heart to help a woman who she thought she was going to help.
And to be clear, we are not saying that
Right.
these are virtuous people that do this, because it's evil
Absolutely.
what they're doing.
Definitely.
But at least we can understand that there's a human need in all of us to want to do something that affirms in us a sense of goodness. But here, it's a substitute savior. Abortion is a substitute savior. It's not a genuine savior. And yet, I think at least then when we build relationships with people on the other side, we don't need to start with the foundation that says they're just demonically evil, I'll have nothing to do with them. No, they're people that are very misguided. They are slaves to sin, and they think they're doing the right thing.
Yes.
What was your first impression, feeling when you walked back into that building?
Oh, well, that took a while because we actually occupied the house next door. So when I first saw that building, my knees started to shake in the car because I didn't know if they still did that there. And then it took me to look to the left where I saw it said for lease, and I'm like, not here, God. And he said, it's here. And I parked, and I called John, and I called Martha Avila, who is now the president of Heartbeat of Miami, and I said, I think I found our location. And we were in that little house for 6 years until I got the strength to tell Martha, I don't want to point to the building, because when the girls would come in, I was their counselor and there was a window. And I used to say, I'm not here to tell you what you need to do, but I do need to share my heart and tell you what happened in that building right there. And so one good day I told Martha, I want to believe God for the building. We need the space. We need a larger place. We're better. And when I walked in there, I literally had a flashback. Unbelievable. I saw the cars as they were parked in the front. The building was still very much still in the same way. I saw a ramp, and that was very difficult because I remember wheeling the girls down off that ramp into the abortion room. And when we entered the building, we entered it through the back door, which is the room that the abortion was performed. I saw a sink and a water spigot that I knew that's where the autoclave was. That's where we used to wash all the instruments. And I'm glad I was able to get my healing. I did a Forgiven and Set Free, which helped me to understand that that part of my life was over, and now we were here to really be able to tell women, I know what you're going through. I sat in this very same room.
When you look at a young girl who's 17 and you look her in the eye and you say, I know what you are going through, how has God used that experience of yours, an unbelievably dark chapter? I mean, what you just described about going back to the building, I'm shivering thinking about what that must have been like for you. What do you see in their eyes? I'm not asking you what you hear them say intellectually. Is you're looking into the eyes of that 17-year-old girl and you say, I know you. Tell me what you see.
Anger, and sadness. They want to believe what we're telling them is true. In other words, they walk in there and we put out the options in a way that we create for them a what could be. Mm-hmm. And for me, the girls know that one of my highlights is the fact that we need to call her within 24 hours, because when she walks out of there, she's going to her reality.
Oh, yeah.
To someone who's going to tell her, what did they tell you? Don't even go there. And then all of a sudden, she starts to shatter again. But if you call her back, she knows that what you said to her was true. And this time, we invite her to come back with whoever is telling her that, and to help them understand. And by then, it's God.
Yeah.
It's one thing I've learned. There's only one Savior, and it ain't me.
Right.
You know?
Right, or me.
All right.
When they come back, what is the save percentage?
When they come back?
Yeah, when they come back for that second visit, when you call them back.
That's very important, because they know that there is someone who's safe that they can come and talk to, that what we told them was true. And every time they have an opportunity to hear that, to have the ultrasound, obviously, because we're always telling them, remember, from 0 to 12 weeks is a very high percentage that she can have a spontaneous miscarriage. So I tell her, why do you want to go and do something that you may not even need? So my whole thing is, I need to try to keep her pregnant.
Right.
Because there's bonding going on, because, like unconsciously, she's being attached to that baby. Yeah. And so, and oftentimes, they will come back in 6 or 8 weeks later, and then guess what? She may be in the process of a miscarriage. And then all of a sudden it's like, what's happening? You know? And then you see that maternal instinct of wanting, now I don't have control over it.
Right.
And it could be a sad thing, but then if she hears the baby, now the baby's grown a little bit, and there's that other person who might be there that came with her, that we link with that person. If they're there to help her, we bring them in. If they're not, we try to keep them away. But it's a very high success rate when they come back, when they see their ultrasound, when they hear a heartbeat, when they see the movement, when they see people that are being transparent and just loving on them. I'd say it's probably like a 92% keep their baby.
92%.
Yes.
Now, do you attribute that primarily to them connecting with their own child, or is it that they feel like somebody's walking through this with them, or is it basically a cumulative effect?
Well, they're afraid. If this is their first pregnancy, they don't understand what's going on. They're very afraid of the whole aspect. The mere fact that there's some change going on, that's scary. But when they know that there's someone there that's going to walk it through with them and be there for them. A lot of them don't even know if their parents are going to let them stay at the house. So, these are the real issues, the current issues of what's going on. And as I said, just having someone that they can talk to. I know that's what I needed.
Yeah. I heard a speaker say once a statement, I'm curious your take on it, from someone who's been on not only the crisis pregnancy side of this, but both ends of the abortion struggle. Here was the statement. If a woman facing a crisis pregnancy is not more horrified of abortion than she is terrified of her own crisis pregnancy, her child dies. What level of accuracy would you give that?
I believe that's very high accuracy. I think it's both spins.
And there is a bit of a discussion going on in pregnancy center ministry today over whether we should focus most of our effort on the felt needs of the woman who's present, or should we focus more on her child and saving that child? What would you say in response to that conflict?
The woman, absolutely. The pregnant woman. If we save her, if we can help her, she's going to keep her baby. And at that moment, for those first couple of weeks or months, it's all about her. It really is. I would even say a woman who had planned her pregnancy. Like I said, any change in her whole lifestyle could be a reason to say, well, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
I have a funny thing that happened right when I was going to have my daughter. I remember I got that first pain, that Brachus pain or whatever they call it, and I looked at my mom and I said, you better see what you do, because I'm not doing this. The pain alone of the fact that of what it freaked me out,
Right,
and
right.
I remember that.
And I would assume that pro-lifers, like those watching us right now,
Yes.
should never assume a baby is safe when you're talking to someone facing an unplanned pregnancy. Say something a little more about that.
I would say, and we've often discussed that at the clinics, because we rank very high in Miami of women who can switch at a dime. And that's exactly how we look at it. Unless she is seeking a baby, is a Christian, has pretty much all of the support, we identify them as being AV, abortion vulnerable. Mm-hmm. She's vulnerable up until the day she's going to have that baby.
Right.
Because, as we have often seen, she's come in, everything is fine. Within a couple of weeks, the boyfriend doesn't want to be around. Now she's wondering if she can do this by herself. She could have gone to a doctor's appointment 2 or 3 months later. There's an adverse diagnosis. She's back there again. It has been as difficult as a woman who's 6 months pregnant walks home and finds another woman in her bed with her husband.
Wow.
And now she's doing it just to get back at him.
Just a revenge factor.
So there's so many, we honestly know that she's vulnerable up until she's ready to have the baby. So many things can happen.
When you encounter clients who identify as Christian, set aside for the moment whether we think they genuinely are, but they identify as Christians, what are the reasons they give for needing an abortion?
Oftentimes I would say it could be that they're living in sin, that they're having an affair, that they just had a child, and that there's just no way that they could see themselves, as any other, honestly. I mean, unless she's a devout Christian that is serving God and wants that baby, she's like any other woman out there.
Yeah, yeah. Getting back to your story, walk me through, or walk our viewers through, those first few moments when you began to have doubts about what you were doing, and you first felt the tug of God on your life. What were the markers of those moments?
In regards to working in the
abortion industry, where you began, I'll rephrase it this way. When you were working in the abortion industry, and you're in the thick of it, and you're doing work that is, of course, diametrically opposed to where you are now.
Right.
What were the first inklings in your soul where you said, I don't know, I'm not sure?
Actually, I have to really be honest. I would say that once I got pregnant and I wanted the baby, and everyone around me was telling me how this was not the right time, that there was time in the future to have children, and I just stuck to my guns, although I did abort my first baby there. I didn't really come to think of it as anything. In other words, I believe that that was a place for a woman who didn't want a baby, but I wanted my baby. That was the difference. And I didn't have the support.
Yeah.
And the fact that God was so good to me, and I got pregnant shortly after the abortion, which was an answer to prayer. So at that moment, I was like, wow, God heard me. He knew how much I wanted that baby, and he has given me a replacement child. And it was only a few weeks later that I had a friend who's today my best friend, walked in, and she came to support a friend that she was bringing who was seeking an abortion, and my Christian friend was actually there in case this girl changed her mind. So my Christian friend also says, you know what, I think I might be pregnant. So when she did her test and her test was positive, I saw the joy in her. And I'm like, man, she gets to be happy and show it. And that was the first time that I shared with anybody, besides my mom, that I was pregnant.
Right.
And she was the one who shared Christ with me for the very first time in my life.
What did she say to you?
Well, when I told her, she says, well, guess what? She says, I'm excited that you're going to have your baby and we can do this together. So a stranger from the street comes into the clinic to do a pregnancy test, to be there for another girl, finds out my secret, and she tells me that she'll be there for me.
See,
And
this is why I say God found you.
Oh, yeah.
God put this
Absolutely.
together. These are details that don't just
Scott,
happen. Yeah.
He sent Evelyn, my friend, and then when I was in the thick of it, really in the thick of it, where I said the sinner's prayer. I went to church one time, but I wasn't ready to surrender. But when I was, Scott, he sent a woman on a bank line who walked up to me, and I have 3 children under the age of 6, and I was suicidal. I was in New York City, back up there. My husband and I were not together, and I wanted to die. And this woman walked up and she said, you look very sad. Can I pray for you? And I said, honey, do whatever you want.
Right.
Whatever. She brought 12 people up to my apartment when my husband was home, and they prayed for me. And from that moment on, God was all I wanted to know about.
Yeah.
I changed from the inside out. It was a Pentecostal woman with her church.
Yeah.
And whatever they said, the best part was she taught me how to pray. And she taught me how to fast. And things started to happen.
Yes.
It was exciting.
Oh, what a great, great story. So now, moving forward, you're working on the other side of this. You're helping young girls in an area where the vulnerability to abortion is really high geographically.
Yes.
What do you think causes these girls to change from I'm going to kill my child to I'm going to love and nurture? What, if you could pinpoint one thing, what would it be?
I would say that the support that's offered, non-judgmental, being transparent, bringing the truth and love, and letting them see that there's actually something that is inside of them that's growing. And like I tell them, sweetheart, you may think that you're not a parent because you're not carrying your child in your arms, but you're carrying your child in your womb.
Right.
You will always be a parent. You could either decide not to have your baby and kill your baby, or you can have your baby.
And you're not afraid to use that language with them. Which is, I think, quite refreshing, because there are some who would say we're being judgmental.
Right.
We're not being Christ-like if we call abortion killing. Here you are, you're being loving, and yet you're being honest.
That's it. And I think that's what she needs to hear, because they're lying to her on the other side, telling her like they told me. You'll be fine. It's nothing. I know what it is. I saw it. Number one. And number two, who promises you to have another baby?
Oh boy, good point.
What happens if you have everything you've ever wanted, the little white picket fence, the education,
career,
everything,
the glamour,
and what you want more than life, you don't get. That's where I take them to.
Yeah.
You need to, this decision is not something that you want to make overnight. We need to talk. You need to think.
Let's look at you 15 years down the road.
Exactly.
And there's nothing inherently unchristian about doing that. I think as Christians, sometimes we think, well, if we somehow just go to the pragmatic and the practical, we're wrong. No, when we're talking to somebody who is contemplating a grave sin that will not only destroy the life of their child, but destroy them.
Exactly.
Outside the grace of God, they will live destroyed because of this decision.
Absolutely.
It is okay to help them see what that looks like.
I think it's very important because we're not lying to them.
Right.
They need the truth. And
Yeah.
those are the ones that, we just had our 14th anniversary, that come back and they hug me and they say, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you spared them an unspeakable evil, and the Lord working through you gave them an alternate future,
Yeah.
one where they could live for His glory and not experience the hellish consequences that come from their decisions. Wow, powerful stuff. Jeanne, thank you for sharing with us
So
and
welcome.
being here as part of our conference.
Awesome. Thank you.